Welcome to the channel, everybody. I'm Brant Fowler, and I'm ready to talk about only good comics. Now let's hit that intro. In today's video, we're going to talk about one of my favorite comics on the stand, Radiant Black. This is Volume 1, the trade collection collecting the first 6 issues of the series. This is by Kyle Higgins with art by Marcelo Costa. As the pull quote on the front says, by Robert Kirkman, you may have heard of him, he created Invincible and The Walking Dead, says, "The perfect superhero comic for anyone missing Invincible." I could not agree with that statement more, and I'll get more into that in a little bit. I also want to call a shout out to Scott Snyder. You may know him from a famous Batman run and creator of The Court of Owls. He says, "Radiant Black is too much fun, classic superhero greatness, remade brightly and brilliantly for a new generation." Part of the description, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it says, "For fans of Invincible and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comes a brand new series from acclaimed writer Kyle Higgins and artist Marcelo Costa that reinvents superheroes for a new generation." If you have not checked out Radiant Black yet, when you do, you are in for a treat. Now, before we get into today's video, if you do enjoy the content on this channel, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video going up on Only Good Comics. And give us a thumbs up because it really does help the channel out. And you can follow me across social media at Only Good Comics. Now, let's get back to today's video. So, the thing I love about Radiant Black is it is a completely relatable story with a humongous kind of a not really a backdrop, but an overlay of superhero goodness. And you have everything from drama to comedy to action, complex emotions and complex characters. So much going on in this book. So let's talk a little bit about this. Now, just in case you have not read Radiant Black yet, I'm not going to spoil any major elements or plot points of the comic, so you can try it out and enjoy it for yourself. But just to tell you a little bit about this starts off focusing on a character by the name of Nathan Burnett, who is a writer who's just turned 30, and his life's not going the way that he would hope. His career's not really taking off, and he's kind of forced to move back in with his parents. He hits rock bottom, has to move back from the West Coast to the Midwest in Lockport, Illinois, and kind of start from scratch and figure out what he's going to do next with his life. And that is very evident from the very first page of the very first issue of this comic that shows his bank account versus his negative credit card balance. But you can see the contrast of what he actually has, which is less than $50, and how much he owes, which is a lot of money. So as we kick off this whole story, his career is kind of falling apart. He's also doing a side hustle as a driver, and that's not going so well either. So every aspect of his life is just, like I said, falling apart. He hits rock bottom, or at least rock bottom so far in his life, and like I said, has to move back in with his parents and reconnect with them, who they're very concerned about their son. They want him to do more with his life and to kind of snap out of it and get his act together, basically. He also reconnects with some old friends, his childhood best friend, Marshall, who plays heavily into the story going forward in the second half of this arc, and specifically past this arc, he becomes a major player in this story. So very early on in the issue, we see Nathan, after feeling sorry for himself, after playing the blame game, after going through all these emotions and dealing with everything, we see that he connects with the Radiant and gains these amazing abilities, the abilities to fly and of super strength, and has so much potential that he hasn't even unlocked yet. When he first gets this, he doesn't really know what's happening. He thinks he's being possessed by something, and he's trying to get it off. He's trying to pull it off, and slowly he discovers that he actually has these abilities. And over time, very quickly actually, he realizes that he can actually do some good. He can actually be important. He can actually help people, and he starts performing selfless acts. But in the process of doing this, he still neglects his career And because nobody knows about these abilities except for Marshall, his parents think he's just sleeping all day and going out and partying all night with Marshall, or hanging with him and drinking at the local pub or whatever. They don't see him doing anything else, so they're obviously concerned, and their concern continues to grow. Meanwhile, Marshall's like, dude, you got to do something huge with this. You can do whatever you want. And Nathan's trying to be responsible. He's always been the responsible one, but now he's got this new part of his life that he can just kind of let loose and kind of let things out and become a better version of himself in a different way. But in the process, again, he continues to neglect his passion and his career and the way that he can actually get his life going. Throughout the course of this first arc, we are also introduced to Radiant Red, who is on the other side of the spectrum, no pun intended. Radiant Red is robbing a bank, and these two combat. And now Nathan, while he's trying to protect people, trying to stop a bank robber, he's also trying to figure out who this Radiant Red person is, and if they just found it randomly like he did, or if they have more information and on the whereabouts of, like, on where this power source came from and what it means and why it chose him. So he's dealing with all these questions all around it as well. Now, before I get more into the story, I do want to talk a little bit more about these characters. Marshall and Nathan, they have common ground in the fact that they are both creative people. They're both kind of geeks in different ways. Like, Marshall he's a film nut. He's a fan of the classics, but remember, these guys are 30, so Nathan, while he is trying to entrench himself in pop culture by becoming a writer out in Hollywood and all this stuff, Marshall is coming up with harebrained schemes and get-rich-quick schemes, and there's these Marshall shorts at the back of a bunch of the issues with a new scheme that he's come up with. But he's the kind of fan that kind of stopped following popular trends a long time ago, so modern technology and modern terminology is completely lost on him. And so it's kind of funny seeing him trying to interact and trying to be cool and trying to connect with people younger and getting mad at them. He works at a video rental store, or I believe it's a video rental store, and so he gets mad when people don't understand the nuances of 30-year-old, 20-year-old, 10-year-old franchise that he loves, right? So it's interesting because Marshall is kind of, I wouldn't call him a slacker because he's always doing something, but he doesn't look beyond. And Nathan has always been a bigger picture guy, and he's always tried to do something greater, something grand, and Marshall's just kind of trying to get to the next day. So their philosophies are completely different, but they have that commonality. But it also makes them butt heads because there's frustration on both sides. It's like, why can't you just let loose, Nathan? Why can't you just be more serious, Marshall? So that's the kind of relationship and the dynamic that these two have, and they play off each other really well. I have been in friendships like that multiple times in my life, and it is a very interesting dynamic that works because you have a certain, like I said, you have a certain commonality, but you have certain differences that kind of pull you apart and push you together at the same time. It's a really interesting thing. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. But anyway, that aside, some interesting things happen going forward for these two characters, especially after this arc, that pushes the boundaries of their friendship and their bond. But like when you stretch a rubber band so far that it's nearing that breaking point, that kind of thing, it's getting to that point at some point in this. But in this first arc, they're tight, and this finding this Radiant Black has brought them back together, and it's something that they can explore together. Marshall on the outside looking in, and Nathan kind of controlling this thing. Unfortunately for Nathan, his rock bottom by moving back in with his parents was not the lowest point that he suffers, and by the end of this arc, something very serious happens with Nathan that I will not spoil. But Marshall has to come to the rescue, and then we see an entirely new version of the Radiant Black going forward into the next arc. We are also introduced at the end of this arc to Radiant Pink and Radiant Yellow come into play at the very end, and then we get the origin story of Radiant Red and their motivations behind robbing the bank and everything. So it's really interesting how within 6 issues they have expanded this universe to multiple characters with multiple motivations that are all completely relatable in different ways. And it's just a powerful read, a powerful book, and like the commentary and the pull quotes and the descriptions say, if you're a fan of Invincible and you miss that kind of storytelling in a superhero comic, this is the book for you. If you're a fan of Power Rangers, you can already see the comparisons with Radiant Red, Radiant Black, Radiant Pink, so on and so forth, and how that compares to that, but in a very different way. Whereas Power Rangers, they were always a team and they were always together. These individuals are discovering each other separately and having to come together. And on top of just the Radiants, they've already expanded this universe to include Rogue Sun, now the Dead Lucky, Infernal Girl Red, and so on and so forth. So this universe continues to grow and expand, and it's just a very powerful read. I love Invincible. It is like one of my favorite comics of all time. Power Rangers, I'm loving what Boom Studios is doing with that franchise. I was never a huge fan of the TV show, but my brother was, and I watched a lot of it with him. So I have a lot of knowledge about both Power Rangers and Invincible, and this is the perfect marriage of both of those things in a completely fresh and different way. So if that's the kind of story that gets your blood pumping, that gets you excited, you need to check out Radiant Black. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed my recommendation. And if you'd like to get more recommendations like this, more video content like this, definitely hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of the videos on this channel. And of course, give me a thumbs up, a like, because that really does help the channel out. And you can follow me across social media at Only Good Comics. So until the next video, I'm Brant Fowler, and join me next time for Only Good Comics.